Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, you have noticed that this new format we are running in the conference includes a biomechanic information. Yesterday we were looking at contact times, stride lengths of the top 10,000 meter runners. Today we will look into discus. Tomorrow the topic is speed. I can promise you already some interesting data about the 100-meter sprint man. You can guess what we will look for, because it was an interesting race. Actually, in the sense of the Chinese, for some people it was interesting. And this part is an opportunity for you to get first-hand biomechanic information from this competition, freshly measured, and we have always expert coaches who will explain us. So let's listen to our experts. You have already had the privilege to hear Sean. I am pleased to invite Mr. Dale Stevenson. Give him a big clap. He's not only the one who will choose the tattoo for Tom, he is also the coach. So we are pleased to have with us the coach of the gold medalist in shot put. I'm coach myself, I know. If we have an applied sport science man, yes, we are listening, we are interested. But if we have a coach who has just produced a result, this is credibility. So let's later hear from him. What is he doing to produce this outstanding gold medal? It's not a ranking. I just start from here, down there, down under, and at the very end, I'm pleased to welcome another expert, not in distance running, but in throwing. Oskar Gede is member of our Coaches Commission and president of the, you correct me, Coach Association for South America. Please give Oskar Gede a clap. He will be the moderator for that throwing part for two reasons. You don't get bored about me, and he has more competence on that. Thank you, Oskar.
Yes, first of all, thank you. And mostly thank to our two guests, and congratulations for the outstanding results here. I think that we as coaches, we need to talk and to ask very practical or very concrete sequences, questions. So both for Sean and Dale, feel free to ask everything you want to ask, and keep in mind that we have an outstanding, unique opportunity to put scientific knowledge into practical terms. So first of all, congratulations for your gold medal. Yes, and then we're going to have a look on the presentation showing the biomechanics, and then we start. Yeah, thank you.
So, turn this on. We've only just seen this. This has just come through to us. It's just some biomechanical data that's come through from the discus competition, and I'm interested to maybe find out Dale's thoughts as well, having just spent a couple of minutes looking through it. Actually, this was the greatest discus competition of all time. Two guys over 69 meters, losing by 2 centimeters between them. But also, what was very interesting for me is that the first four in this competition are all aged 24, 25, and it was the new generation coming through. We saw Piotr Malachowski and Robert Harting not make an impact at all. And I was watching Piotr coming to talk to his coach, and he's like, "I got nothing here. Sorry, there's nothing I can do." And Robert was trying to come up with some strange technique to get more speed by going out to the side, and so it was a very interesting competition to watch unfold from that point of view. But I really think it's an exciting time in the discus with these new young guys coming through, and there's some special talent and also special athletes, and that's noticeable as well. They're all big guys, but there's some good athletes amongst them. So the results of the competition. Andrius Gutsius of Lithuania, so following in the footsteps of Virgilijus Alekna, two-time world champion. So another great thrower coming through. Again, birth 1991. threw a lifetime best. He'd thrown 68 meters this year on a couple of occasions, 69.21, very impressive. Daniel Stahl, who's the world leader this year, Sweden, thrown 71.29, but here thrown in a stadium. It's very interesting. His coach, Viestin Hafsteinson, is the same coach to Gerd Kanter in the past, and he said this is Daniel's first major medal in a senior championships, and already with that silver medal, he's thrown further than Gerd Kanter ever threw in any of his major championships, where he won Olympic world title and has made 16 consecutive world finals. So it's quite incredible, the capacity. Mason Finley, young American guy, another big, strong guy. Daniel and Mason are both about 140, 150 kilos, 150, 60 kilos, I should say. Gutsius is probably about 122. And Frederick Dacres also similar, 122 kilos, 65.83, struggling a little bit with a finger injury. That we were all expecting him to catch a big throw, and so with some of the other throwers out there, Mason Finley was looking over his shoulder all the time. But I think it's a great thing going forward and an exceptional level of competition. One of the things to take away from this is that you see that the level of performance based on season's best, Gutsius was above his season's best through his lifetime best, in fact, in that competition. So did Mason Finley, had a big personal best, going from 66.70 to 68.03. Dacres was down on his, but I think the finger injury. Daniel was down slightly on the 71.29, but that 71.29 also took place in very good wind conditions. For a competition inside a stadium, incredible results. So, Dale, do you think?
No, it was an amazing competition, and I guess we can just ask it as we dig through this data here, because it is fresh for us too. It'd be great if there are questions as we go along, and if you're okay with it, Sean,
Yep.
Let's just have the discussion as we go through it rather than waiting for a Q&A at the end. So throw your hand up and we'll chew through it together.
We're going to try and go through some of the data. Just there's a huge biomechanics project going on through this World Championships, so there's going to be some great information that comes out of it that you coaches are going to be able to access down the line. They had high-speed digital cameras working from the stand around the stadium, capturing 3D motional analysis, 150 frames a second. So they've been working quite hard to turn this around quite quickly for our information. They're going to take a little longer going forwards. But they're looking at, in this report, it's only a few selected variables. There'll be a lot more that's happening in the full research that comes out later. So I'm just going through. Oh. Okay. Gunther? He's gone. No. So there was meant to be, well, I've got pictures here that are meant to be on that presentation that don't appear. So this is Frederick Dacres, a phase analysis of his discus throw. This is going to be difficult without you seeing it. Basically, what they're doing is comparing phase analysis, so entry, flight time, transition, and delivery phase in the throw. The distance, release velocity, angle of release. So without these pictures, that's going to make it pretty difficult.
Get it going on the computer.
No, it's not on there. That's what I mean. It goes to a white screen, so they haven't added it into this.
Yep.
They've
Let's just
got the
pretend
pages
that
that
it
it
was
should
up
be
there.
on. So,
Go ahead, one more, please.
huh?
Go ahead, one more.
Yeah, no,
No?
yeah, it's just white slides.
Yeah.
It's white slides. So whatever they gave us the printout, but they didn't give the same information on the printout. Well, if we go to the comparison of the four, I think that for me there's a few things that come out of this. Dale was saying to me that he would have liked to have seen more attempts from each thrower to compare one throw of Gutsius to another throw of Gutsius, but what they have done, relative phase analysis, I'm just going to hold this up to see if you can see it, only because the colors should give you an idea of the different phases. So we're going from the entry phase. This pink is the flight time, and then the amortization in the middle and the delivery phase. So the interesting thing to me is the relative time into the middle. The one thing I'm picking out on, you can see that three of the athletes are pretty similar in terms of their entry into the delivery phase, and all have fairly long flight times or fairly similar flight times. Whereas Daniel Stoll, who's the biggest and the tallest of those guys, actually has a shorter entry and a shorter flight time. And I know that in their technical approach, because he's so tall, he's so big, they have to go down to get across. They can't afford to jump up. They can't afford time. So they're trying to keep the flight time for Daniel down to a minimum. And they want that minimum to be the most important part about the technique for them. So they're really turning and sprinting down and then keeping that flight time down to a minimum. Because he, at 6 foot, 201, 202, if he gets up in the air at all, that circle is too small for him. So he's then that was a key thing for me. Is there anything that jumped out at you, Doug?
Yeah, I guess if I'm looking at this with my coach's hat on, it's interesting to compare them all, but it's somewhat arbitrary because it doesn't really tell the full story. I'd be more interested to see, let's say, take Daniel, for example, who finished in silver, take a number of his throws and compare the release velocities of the various throws to each other, and then that gives us a profile from which we can start to reverse engineer what's important in a technical model rather than just assuming we have the right answers. So that would be something that maybe we can dig into, or off the back of this data. I'm sure it's there, but this is fresh off the press. So.
Yeah, and I think also this comes to the application of science. We're talking about the application of science in lifting, but this is applied biomechanics as well. It's very important. The biomechanics guys come out and they collect data. For us as a coach, we need to know how to apply that data, and sometimes a lot of data doesn't help us. So without the right context, it also doesn't help. I think that's part of the problem, is that there's lots of different techniques, there's lots of roads to Rome, and so maybe Gutsius is trying to get more flight time. Maybe, and I know Daniel is not, because I know him closely here and his coach, and I spend a lot of time with him. So you also need to know the context that it's being brought into, and so from a coach perspective, we're trying to find things to go forward. Oh, there we go. Okay.
The magic finger was.
Yeah.
So where are you?
Well, we jumped ahead, so we can go back and pick up on the first. It was the fourth place throw, back rest.
You are in
Yeah.
control.
Okay. Thanks. So. Frederick, 6583, release velocity, these are going to be fairly consistent because we know that you need to be 23 to 24 meters a second if you want to throw 65 to 70 meters. Angle of release, release height, I think fairly standard in this. The one that jumped out at me, Gutsius, was a little higher angle of release, but in terms of distance, that's the least important factor. Aero percentage, as I guess, is time in the air.
No, I believe aero's a metric in this one that allows for the aerodynamics of the implement.
Oh, okay.
So if you're
So
purely
angle of attack.
measuring release out of the hand, that's going to give you one measure, and then obviously how far the tape takes it is dependent on the flight angle. Is the disc flying face up? Is it flying flat? What are the wind conditions? Things like that. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be what I'm thinking aero would account for.
So from the start of the throw, from zero, going into the entry, hitting the contact in the middle, about 0.4 seconds, and then takeoff. That's takeoff, 0.4, right? And then flight time is the yellow here, and then the time it takes for then once the right foot is the end of flight, left foot to hit the front of the circle. So also an important thing, how quickly does the left foot come down at the front? And then the delivery talks about perhaps also the range of how far back they're catching the discus at the end. So.
Are there any questions or clarity around what these various punctuation marks mean? Does everyone just want to make sure that everyone can kind of follow what is an entry? I don't want to assume everyone's from a discus or rotational throws background, so there's no stupid questions. Feel free to.
The flight time is the no support phase, correct?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And it's here in yellow as airborne, so that would be when both feet are in the air.
So I think there's a technical part. So some people try to jump up more. And for me, discus throwing there's kind of two approaches. What I call left to left. So it's a left foot push to get the left foot down at the front of the circle as quickly as possible. That decreases the flight time and should get the left down in a quicker point. And the other is right to right. So when the right foot picks off out of the back and you tend to kick across, that tends to give you a little more air time, become a little more jumpy. And then the left in that action, because it has to be pulled and pushed to the front of the circle, usually takes a little longer to get down at the front. So it's a different in approach in those two. And, so yeah, we're going to go forwards. So just to pick up on phase analysis, so a little longer on the turn around the back, flight time quite similar, transition time a little low. We can show the comparison towards the end, but I think release velocity, of course, further distance, so fairly similar. Release angle fairly similar to Dacres. Let's come to let's do the phase analysis of Goodsius, right?
Good one.
So this is a better way of explaining. Dale, you want to take this on?
Yeah, no, this, I guess, it's important to, before we dig into any of the numbers, to understand exactly what it is that we're measuring. So this is a nice graphic representation of that. It might help us. So essentially, if you view each of these phases, and we'll look again at the phase analysis comparison between the four throwers, every different colour represents, or the change of colour represents, a foot either leaving the ground or touching the ground is the easiest way to think about it. So from that, we can start to infer, however we want to pull it apart. But I think this is probably, it would have made sense to put this one first in the order. But yeah, that's all right. Anything that jumps out there from the audience that you're interested in, or you can see, or
the slide before.
Yeah.
Do they at any time show the height of the athlete?
Good question.
I can give you the height of the athlete because it was on this competition thing. It should give you the height and weight. I think usually does. Oh, maybe it doesn't on this sheet. But Goodsius is 2 meters. So Dacres is 196. Stahl is 20. He says 2 meters, but I think he's 201, 202. And Mason Finley is also 202. So big guys, tall guys. So the thing that jumps out for me on this phase analysis and the comparison below the four athletes is that the flight time, the airborne time for Goodsius is much higher than the others. So it spends a lot more time in the air, but then very quick transition of the left foot coming down. So the left foot, as he comes off the left foot to the back, to the right foot coming down in the middle is longer relative to the other guys, 87 milliseconds. But then the left foot comes down very quickly at the front. And remember, the most important thing is we can only apply force into the delivery of the throw with both feet on the ground. So that left foot contact time, that left foot down, is an important factor. And then what we want to look at is when the left foot comes down at the front, and you can see it in this fourth picture along, how far back is the discus? Because then it's that delivery, the time that it takes for him to unwind from that wrap position when his left foot comes down. So he's landing quite far back, has a good stretch on the discus, but also is very fast in his delivery phase. It was very much faster in the actual delivery phase 173 compared to the others. Yeah.
Nothing from me at this point. I mean, as a coach, some of this is interesting and some of it's not. To be honest, I wouldn't normally dig into it in this kind of detail. Certainly for Tom, anyway.
No, but you would use this comparing Tom's throws.
I'd use
if you're
this,
trying to see if you're going to use. Is it better to have a higher angle of release or a lower angle of release? The difference. You work with the TrackMan system.
Yeah, we do. And I guess where I'm seeing the biggest value in this increasingly is longitudinally over a number of years and training cycles to be able to see what's changing and where we can have the greatest potency to increase ultimately release velocity in throwing, which is the king of all the metrics. So I'm wary of trying not to get too bogged down in this. Unless there's any questions, maybe we can just sort of keep ploughing through.
So,
this one is a bit. The relative phase analysis is somewhat interesting, but I'm not sure. Yeah, there's a hand in the crowd there.
Have a micro there. Yep. We need a micro there, please. Gunther, please.
Just to keep it
Yes.
keep it flowing too. If you grab the microphone, could you introduce yourself and say your name so we can chat?
Not talking, not working. We can hear you.
No, but we.
No, please.
We can hear. We can hear.
But we need to translate the question to all languages.
Hi, I'm Aaron Gatson from Dominica. I'm actually a jumps coach, so this stuff is all kind of new to me. But I guess what I'm trying to understand for how you guys look at it, do you think that you can compare athletes in this way? So it sounded like you might be saying that, over longitudinally over time, you might see how an athlete grows. From a jumping perspective, some people believe there's different technical models for different types of jumpers. Like some people might be more, strength-based or power-based or speed-based. And I just, off the top of my head, I'm thinking that, hey, some of these guys might have longer arms than other guys. Some guys might be stronger or faster. So those different numbers might not indicate anything in particular because it might be the best thing for that athlete.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. That's really astute observation, and that's one of the pitfalls of the philosophy of a technical model in general, is that it implies that any athlete who is, you can never reach that technical model, so you're always going to be in a state of lack, and you're trying to then bridge the gap between something you are, which is whatever you are right now, and something that you're not, which is an abstract concept of a technical model. So we have to be careful of the way we use that. There's obviously some value in data in this, and having technical modeling, and to me, having some kind of functional ideals, but we're really talking about it only a small handful that I would subscribe to, and it's Newton's laws, really, physics, that we're trying to overcome, rather than putting up let's put up Jonathan Edwards or whatever and say, how do I bridge the gap between my 16-year-old girl and Jonathan Edwards?
Yep.
That's not that useful to me as a coach. Does that speak to your question there, Aaron?
I think this is always the issue that I have with biomechanics and applied biomechanics. Yes. You can get a lot of information out, but the coach, a good coach with a good eye, can see most of these things straight away. And so, from a working coach's point of view, biomechanics, it's taken 4 days for us to get this, and so whereas a good eye, you can see it at that was a higher angle of release, that seemed faster.
Sean,
so you can get these things.
We will save a lot of money next time and just ask you.
Yeah. Exactly. Besides, I think it's more important that we move on to the questions, because we have the champion coach here.
It's, first of all, but at the same time, we cannot neglect the importance of making intra-individual comparison. I mean, we can have the data for your athlete, and then you compare and see what changed in a given throw in a given day. But I think everything is important if we make a proper use of the information. So we open the floor to your questions. Allow me to start with. We have seen many very good results in these championships, mainly in the field events. So I think that we all are worried about how to achieve the best result in the best moment. So how do you prepare, how do you taper in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks in order to achieve your best result or top results here? Regarding, for example, strength training related with throwing events. I mean, how do you organize, how do you taper in the last weeks?
That's for me.
For both of you.
Tom?
Okay. You had the champion athlete here. Come on.
Both of you.
I didn't throw anything. I guess to give some context, in the last, just say 3 weeks or so, we've probably done maybe 4 gym sessions, a total of less than 2 hours in the gym over the last 4 weeks, but we've thrown 15, 18 times, separate sessions. So we very much see throwing as a skill in the same way that golf is a skill. Mm-hmm. And so to refine that, we spend a lot less time. And a lot of that's involved probably a shedding of what we thought was important, because it does feel good to... There's a certain security in going to the gym and being strong, because it's easy to measure and it has some crossover. So Getting rid of that required as much of an emotional adjustment as it did a physiological one, but we've found that be prepared to throw out what we believe is true as readily as we're willing to take on new things, and that's yielded some good improvements for us too. And really what it's meant is we've ended up throwing more than I ever thought we ever would. But hey, I trust the data and trust the trends that we're seeing, and a day might come in the near future as Tom continues to evolve as an athlete where we might not be in the gym at all for months on end.
Okay. Sean?
Yeah, I agree. I think that getting the taper right is important, and we've seen with these discus results and things, these guys having lifetime bests here. That's all you can hope for, and so and throwing in a stadium, you don't have really the benefit of conditions. So therefore, it's a pretty honest throw. So for people to throw these, it's not a fluke throw under good conditions. So it's a nice place to see where people are. We saw in the shot put. Interesting because it was the greatest shot put competition in the championship of all time with 7 guys over 21 meters. And what was interesting is that amongst the sort of shot put aficionados around the world, in some cases there was a disappointment because there was so much talk about the potential of 3 or 4 guys of what they're capable of doing if they were all firing on all cylinders. And we've seen them this year. We've seen Ryan Krauser throwing consistently over 22 meters, Joe Kovacs throwing 2250, and Tom also he threw in a competition last week. He came and did the England Championships where he was like 4 meters better than anyone else, and first throw opened up with 2206. It's just kind of crazy to see how good these guys are and how they're making 22-meter throws look pretty easy.
So just to speak to that, I guess there's a rationale behind why we're doing that, and we've certainly with Tom, I've no qualms in sharing. Championships in all events, we see it that it's not necessarily a case of how good is your A game, it's how good is your B game, how good is your C game. Can you fight your way into a top 8 or through qualifying or when things aren't going your way? Because when you're on song, when you're in rhythm and the conditions are good, it's sunny and a nice ring and more like a diamond league kind of circumstance, it's easy to throw far, but championships aren't like that. So we've had to actively seek out difficult training circumstances, difficult tests, throw when you're 4 or 5 meters better than anyone else in the field, throw in the hail and the rain. We did that on Wednesday deliberately. We looked at the forecast, so this is 3 days prior to the competition, and picked the worst period of the day when it was raining the heaviest and went and trained then. Because we figured if you could handle that, then you're going to be best served when the pressure comes on the big stage. So it probably, I can see how people would frame it as maybe that the top end wasn't there, but they really are in championships. I mean, this discus is an exception. Yeah. It's usually a case of who can grind it out, and that's something that we put a lot of work into. So I knew when the pressure comes on for Tom. He was prepared for that, and to throw 22 like the previous week in Bedford, which is essentially a bad circle in the middle of an open field with no one there and cold and windy in rural England. That's a better test to me as a coach than how far you can throw in a diamond league when you're in a 5-star hotel and fed and watered. And,
I think also there's an important point. I remember talking with Dale and Don Babbitt, who's a close associate of both of ours. They were preparing for the Olympics in Athens, Georgia, and Don was relaying me to the fact that as part of their last competition before they went down to Rio, they had a competition there in Georgia where Tom warmed up, took his first throw, and then walked off and sat up in the stands for 30 minutes, and then came down and took his second throw without a warm up through 2150 something. 2156 with having sat down for 30 minutes because he knows that's what he's going to need to do in a qualifying situation in a major championships. So specificity of training and preparation is pretty impressive.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Invite again also the non-throwers to go for strengths. These guys are specialists in strength, and there are definitely some cross-cutting elements for the jumpers, for the sprinters. So don't shy away if you want to know about strength, which is not directly related to throws.
I was going to ask a question because I know Dale, I showed one film of Tom. I didn't want to show too much and steal his thunder, but the one of the things that's impressive for me is that they defocus the strength element of it, but they have some very specific types of exercises and training that they do, and I think just be good to elucidate on that if you can, of what you feel is important for you guys. And
yeah, I guess sitting in the crowd for that first part of your presentation, there was probably 10 or 12 mentions of various bench press metrics, and then there was at the very start one of the Bondarchuk metrics saying that it had a 0.39 or 38 causation. So I mean, we might as well talk about how well you tie your shoes up
exactly
before you throw. We've got to look at what is the most potent stimulus, and that is, of course, throwing. And for us as a shot putter, that's the way I see it. And my job is to consistently ask that question: is this making the ball go further? And answer. If I can answer that in a rigorous, data-driven way, then we can start to get a more effective, potent training stimulus. The important thing, and this is all with an N of one. This is for one athlete and the way that they respond. This isn't something that can just be tarred across. So I'm happy to share everything about Tom, because you could translate it and copy and paste it to someone else and it would work. So, yeah.
The floor is open, please. Questions? Yep.
Good morning, John Carhalios from Tucson, Arizona. I had seen Dale, Tom at Tucson Elites. I know he spends quite a bit of time in the U.S. So since you're coaching him and he's on the road, what type of relationships you guys maintain, or is Mr. Bobbitt in the U.S. taking over, or how is that working out?
Yeah, so it's a good question. One of the challenges of being from New Zealand and the South Island of New Zealand, where we live, is it's the middle of winter right now, and it's 2 degrees Celsius and freezing. So we have to base ourselves overseas for the European summer or the American summer. We've tried various places, being based in Europe, being based in the US, and we've found a good home with some good relationships and connections in the US. It helps when you can speak the language and eat the food, and we've got therapists and places to train there, which helps us now too. Golf courses, keeps me sane. So your question about the relationship with other coaches, I love nothing more than collaborating. My end game, I see it as a coach, is to make myself redundant. And so 3 years ago now, or 2014, Tom and I went away and we spent 4.5 months on the road together, the full time. That's not necessarily sustainable for me. I've got a wife and family, and Tom gets sick of me and I get sick of him. So I went back to our federation and said, how do we make this work long term? And we've now slowly started adjusting it to the point where we can find a happy medium between doing what's needed to be done training wise. It's important that Tom's getting the training done that he needs to, and the competition exposure, but that I can be happy, because I can't give energy that I don't have. So I need to look after myself as well, and that means now I can't, so this year I've come back and forth from New Zealand to the US 3 times. We're fortunate to have some federation support that allows me to do that, and when I'm back, I have full trust and communication with guys like Don, and I've got a strength and conditioning guy who works for me back in New Zealand, and he comes across and fills the gap when I'm not there. So we kind of make it work. It's one of the challenges of being from a small, Southern Hemisphere country, is that we don't have the proximity to just jump on a plane and get to a Diamond League in a couple of hours. We have to essentially have a home away from home, but we make it work, and that requires a bit of yielding of our own ego too. That maybe I'm not as important as I once thought I was. So if I keep my end game of making myself redundant at front of mind, then it gets easier and easier to step away, and one day hopefully Tom needs none of us, but we'll still be there.
Also add to that, I work closely with Viestin Hafsteinson and the group Global Throwing. He has 6 guys in the meet, 4 guys in the discus. Viestin is based in Sweden, He works with Swedish athletes, but also athletes overseas and other people. He now is based in Växjö in Sweden. He was trying in another place, but they have all the facilities, including an indoor hall where they can throw the discus. So that's a pretty good place to be, even in the Swedish winters. But the other way that he works is two major things. Nicholas Arrhenius, who's one of his athletes, competed here in the discus, is actually throws coach at Brigham Young University in America. Viestin works 3 times a week with him via Skype on throwing sessions, so it doesn't need to watch what he's doing in the weight room, but they work live over Skype. Has athletes in other areas as well that does the same thing. But also the other thing is camps. So that might be a camp in Växjö in Sweden where everyone will come together. Mesut Pezzer is from Bosnia, a shot putter. He comes in, he'll spend extended periods there, and also camps overseas at the right time. So we tend to go to America, San Diego for the last 15 years. We've been going there as a group for 1 month, April, May. And then you try and get everyone together, and that's a good period to get lots of work done. And usually they'll have shorter camps in somewhere like Spain or Portugal, other warm weather areas when you need to break up the monotony of being in the cold. There's only so much you can do.
I guess one more thing on that is that, I mean, I'm born and raised in Australia and now living in New Zealand, and there's contextual challenges for all of us, wherever we're from, and I can sense at times chatting with guys who might be from South America or Africa or areas that aren't athletics powerhouses, that maybe you can't do it because it's not like we don't have big training halls like they have in Germany with full-time employed coaches and round the year training and equipped gyms. But you saw Fedric there making do with whatever they've got available to them in Jamaica, and overcoming those contextual challenges is more important to me. So that means relationship skills, working with the federation, empowering the athlete to work on, solo or when I'm not there or there's no coach with them. That's more important than reps and sets. Right. Or at least reps and sets takes a secondary, importance.
And how many years have you been coaching, Tom?
Full time now. This is coming on 4 years. So I finished competing myself in 2012 and retired, and then I was. Again, being from our little corner of the world, there aren't a lot of rotational shot guys, so Tom and I were competitors initially, and then struck up a bit of a relationship. He was coming to Melbourne to stay with me a few times a year and sort of help him out informally, and then start of 2014, I relocated, and that was probably the punctuation point. Yeah.
And you guys have done a real good job. Congratulations. And thank you for your time.
Anything else?
Is there anything from a jumps or sprints perspective that you may value our opinion on from a strength-related point of view? You have a question? Oh.
Yes, come on.
Charlie McConnell from Great Britain. Could you give some background into his development from 5-6 years or so ago? What are you doing now that you weren't doing 5 or 6 years ago?
In what regard? Do you mean training-wise?
Well, I'm just interested in his development. From somebody who's come not from a throwing kind of centre, compared to say Germany, kind of how he's developed in isolation, as it were, there.
Yeah, I guess it's a good question, and Tom's very much from a multi-sport background. He played cricket and rugby to a reasonably high level. Only started focusing on shot put when he was 19. He's now 25. So it wasn't like he was a prodigy at a young age. In fact, he grew up very much in the shadow of Jack O'Gill, who was our top shot putter, breaking the world junior records and things like that. So Tom was very much a generalist, but what that probably ingrained in Tom at a young age was a self-awareness and a grit, a willingness to just keep finding ways to get better and be curious about his craft, that led him to say, okay, maybe I need to get out of my comfort zone at a young age. I need to go to Europe and compete and get my ass kicked, go squeak into a low-level European competition, miss the final, get on a train the next day, go and try and find another competition somewhere in Czech or Germany or whatever, and live out of a suitcase for a few months. And all of those skills that he's developed have made him to the point where he's, now we're, we've got federation support and we're fairly robust now in our processes. He's still got that curiosity and that foundation of how do I get better and what do I need to do. It's never been gifted to Tom, which is probably the biggest virtue that helps him now. And he's easy to work with as a coach because he's willing to take on new things. To give you an example, mindfulness and meditation has now taken a real cornerstone piece of our campaign preparation, and that was totally foreign to Tom 2 years ago. He wouldn't have even tolerated the discussion about meditation, and now he practices it 3 times a day. In fact, it was the very last thing we did before he went into the call room on Sunday night was 10 minutes in our team tent. Got all the therapists out, closed the curtains, and Tom had 10 minutes in there just doing some breathing exercises before he went into the call room. So that willingness to change and willingness to adapt and to throw out preconceptions about what's important and to build new ones is probably Tom's strongest developmental advantage, I'd say.
On the screen there is his progression year on year, so which might allude to when you were taking over, but also I think you can see on that we're still ready for a big throw from him this year. Now that the championship's out of the way, we think
it's a bit disappointing, isn't it?
Yeah, little drop off.
Yeah, I guess that's I think it was one of Dr. Bondarchuk's cornerstone philosophies was that talent, we misuse the word talent. Talent's not about how good someone is now. Talent's about how long someone can keep getting better for, right? And in that way, Tom's really talented, but physiologically, you mentioned his vertical jump numbers compared. I can tell you, as hard as he can go on a Vertec jumping, he's 72-metre max vertical jump. So we're not talking about a physiological outlier here, but we're talking about someone with probably an outlier set of skills and level of self-awareness and introspection and willingness to find a way to get things done.
You mentioned Dr. Bondarchuk. It will be very interesting to know how do you organize the plan, the training year? How do you split, or which model do you use to organize the training process?
Yeah, so we've got coming back to throwing and using that as the foundation of what we do. We've got a physiological model that we want to work towards with Tom, and that requires certain training blocks and periodization models that are replicated. Essentially, we've got a domestic season in New Zealand which runs from December to March, and so we have a 4-month, a smaller version of our, I suppose, macro cycle happens then, and then we've got an 8-month longer elongated version that takes us through the through the international season. But it's essentially the same. It's just a fractal approach, right? So it's the same pattern, just recurrent on a smaller scale. But it's nothing glamorous. It's general to specific.
Logical.
Yeah, it's nothing that would blow anyone's mind away. But there are certain refinements, and we've certainly ended up cutting out a lot of what we thought was important. But you can call it the pyramid approach, you can call it Verkhoshansky's block approach, whatever the terminology you want to apply is. But I wouldn't say there's anything too extraneous in there.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting for me, you talked about, Tom coming from a relatively not a throws powerhouse, but in fact in recent years there's been a lot of attention, and particularly Tom is the same age of Jacko Gill. And Jacko, also from New Zealand, was this phenom that came through from age 14, just throwing out incredible numbers, and everyone was talking about about Jacko being the next world record holder and things like this. And his progress stalled a little bit, and Tom was living in his shadow or just getting on and doing the work and keeping his head down, and has now surpassed everything that Jacko's done by quite a margin. And that for me was an interesting watching that comparison. I first came across Tom when he was still a junior and was really impressed with his technique and what he did. They came on a trip to the UK, and I thought, you know, hey, everyone knows about Jack O'Gill. I haven't heard of this guy, but I'm really impressed, and I've been following him since that period. So it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah.
John Zanfi is my name. I'm from Romania. I'm the Freus coach, or pretend to be. I have a specific question for shot put. How do you use the shot puts from beginning of the season towards the end? I mean how heavy they are. Do you start with what? You finish, how you combine them during the season?
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's the age-old question in throwing. You know, how do you use different implements to predicate certain stimulus? So the first question that I ask to answer that question for myself is, what does a good throw feel like? You know? And we know that for most athletes, and certainly for Tom, a good throw is effortless. It flows. It has rhythm. And it's free. You know, there's not a lot of analysis. It's just an expression. And so with that in mind, we never throw anything more than a 7 kilo shot in training, 7.0, right? We never throw even a competition shot in training. So we go down to about a 6.25, 6.5. So what I'm trying to do is balance out if Tom's fatigued, his central neural system's fatigued, he's not going to be able to find any kind of rhythm or timing or ease with a heavy shot. So I'd lighten the shot. As he freshens up and his horsepower starts to go up and he starts to move at a higher tempo and higher rhythm, then I increase the weight of the shot. So what's staying the same there is the rhythm and the timing. So he can always throw at any time of the year 20 meters to 22 meters with something, and he becomes really familiar. His timing is ingrained, and that's one of Tom's strengths, is that he has, you know, fairly strong timing, and once that's calibrated, my job is just to get out of the way and not interfere with it. So I use the shot more to react to that, and we adjust it on a day-to-day basis. How are you feeling today? I'm a little bit fatigued, Dale, from training. Yesterday we had a heavy eccentric training block or whatever, and we might say, hey, let's just throw the 6.25 today, or the 6 kilo, so he can feel nice and easy, flow, see the shot coming out of the hand at, you know, 13 meters per second or whatever he needs that day, and we just run that kind of philosophy. But I know there's different methodologies out there, but it seems to work for Tom. I don't know. What do you do?
How about you are the world champion, not me. You together with him, of course. How about from a lifting point of view? When you are in preparation phase, let's say bench press, how is the maximum of repetition what you are doing in this particular phase, and how you get down towards the competition season?
Doesn't really change. We have a small train to train window where we're literally talking maybe 2 to 3 weeks, where it's a higher rep, hypertrophy base, and that is just getting the body robust enough to be able to handle what comes after that. The key window for us is we have an eccentric protocol, so it's 2 weeks overloaded eccentric, 2 weeks isometric, and then 2 weeks, I can see the translator behind you rubbing her head trying to figure out the terminology here, and then 2 weeks high-speed ballistic. So that window, that's a 6-week window in the domestic season, and remember before I said in the international season we'd stretch the same pattern out for 8 months, so 4 months and then 8 months, so it then becomes a 12-week protocol in our international season, and each of those little phases goes for 4 weeks. So depending on that, the rep scheme might be anywhere between 3 and 6, but that small hypertrophy phase, we're looking more 8 to 10, just to prepare to train and get back into it. Tom feels good about that, but hey, you don't win points for having big biceps or a big bench press, so it's just something to get back into the swing of things, get back in the gym and get the body feeling good again. But that eccentric protocol, loosely based off, if anyone's read Cal Dietz's triphasic training, it's loosely based off that. We've sort of adapted it over time, but yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, over there. Could you please?
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, that's better. Rob Thickpenny, England Athletics. You mentioned isometric training, which is interesting. There's a prevalence of that in the UK, but often probably not applied in the right way, particularly with throwing. What sort of timings are you looking at when you're doing isometric work? Accepting, though, of course, it's individual to Tom.
Yeah, it is. Just to probe your question a little bit more, when you say timings.
So, I mean, if you're talking sort of isometric holds between maybe 6 to 10 seconds with high loads, but equally we sometimes see people using 30 seconds. What's your thoughts on that?
We're really looking at something above 95% intensity, so 30 seconds starting to, you're dropping away as to the intensity that you can maintain. 5 second, 4 second, 5 second holds is about as long a duration as we ever go. After that, the contractile profile drops off. We've seen that from the data. But the crossover from that to the throw is fairly significant for us, as it's well understood in jumps. It's well understood in horizontal jumps, especially the importance of amortization phase and being able to absorb force as a predicator to apply force. I think we're still getting a hold on that in throws, partly because it's non-sagittal. There's a higher rotational component, but essentially the same philosophy applies. So we're looking at a really fast turnaround, and that Tom's ability to apply force is completely predicated on his ability to absorb it. So we train that first, and I'd rather, it's better off being able to apply this amount of force in this amount of time than this amount of force in this amount of time. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm a distance coach, so I don't know, but a very good question maybe. But why is he not throwing 23 meters yet? And what's your approach towards good with a lighter load?
Just not with the competition shot yet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, things take time. It'll happen.
What's the main variable that needs improvement there, or what you got? You probably got it in your mind for the next 3, 4, 5 years, like clicking that often.
I mean, there's no teacher like time, right? So we'll review this and learn from this campaign, and we have to be prepared and open and curious to dig into everything we've done and be prepared to throw it out and try something new based off that information. So I guess what we're seeing increase over time is the effectiveness metric of our training, and the and not only our training but how we live and how we go about our daily practice and how we structure our season and our calendars and things like that. So with that in mind, I think we'll get a clearer picture of what's needed for Tom to throw 23, 24, 25 metres, and you'll see it happen over time. That said, the stars need to align for those kind of things to happen, right? We know that development's not linear, yeah? It sort of plateaus and then it jumps, and it plateaus and then it jumps. And with the number of guys out there now, I mean, Ryan Krauser is starting to push the mark up there as far as, the furthest throws goes. But what's more poignant is that there's a critical mass of guys now who are throwing far enough to push each other. And when the stars align, you get a nice sunny day at a good Diamond League or a US Champs or something like that. I
think it's also important to look back at this schedule. You see, this is the championships. He performed the best at the championships, but that's not necessarily the most he's able to throw. And you'll see after the Olympics last year, he came out and had a personal best.
Yeah, absolutely. He continues to get better, and that was interesting. That had some periodization implications for us too. Like competing back to back to back to back to back without training. Right? I had this preconception about everything we need to train and build it all up, and then there'll be this perfect little peak where it'll all happen. But what we found is that it's actually a repetition of competition rhythm that allowed him to get that, to build that timing. And once his tempo's on, and it's important for us to get Tom healthy again now and go out and finish off the season strongly, because
he threw his personal best 2 weeks after the Olympics last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
That's why I think in the next 2 weeks we have Diamond League and Diamond League final.
Patience, time, and self-belief.
I think it's going to be very exciting in the shop put.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Werner from South Africa. I'm actually a sprint coach, but listening to you guys, I can see there's a lot of commonalities between training and so on. My question is around testing. How important is it for you, and how often would you do it?
Good question. We test every day. It's just an anecdotal test with my eyes and chatting to the athletes. But we've thrown out a lot of our tests. We used to have a lot more. We used to have strength testing punctuated 4 times a year, and we'd have vertical jump testing. That's one we have held on to, although we just pin less importance on it, so we do it purely for information. It's done every 2 weeks, but outside of that, we do measure throws. We measure each training session. We measure the best throw, and we also measure the 5th best throw of the training session now. That's one I've become interested in, is that pattern has a higher correlation to development from what I've seen than the best throw of the session. So we still collect the best one, but it's just data, right? So the longer we collect it for, the more potent the trend becomes, and the more we can start to make meaningful influence and changes to our training programs. So we don't have any hard and fast tests that we really know, hey, if you do this well, you're going to throw far, other than throwing far. So I probably know less than what I did a few years ago. I would have had some quite strong opinions on what was important, but I don't know. What do you reckon, Werner? You got stuff in sprints other than sprinting that tells you how fast someone's going to go?
Yeah, I was just interested in if there's any correlation between certain tests and what you do in throws. It's the same as what we do in sprinting, your 30, 20-meter tests. Do you do like a standing long jump, vertical jumps, that sort of thing? How does it correlate to certain protocols in your throws? It's
not a tight correlation with anything other than full throws. The one parameter we do know that kills Tom's ability to throw well is mobility. So if he's locked, and it's usually hip mobility and thoracic mobility, and travel sometimes can not be favourable to maintaining that. If he can't look after that, then that affects his timing, and it doesn't matter how strong or power, it doesn't matter what his force time profile is if he can't rotate. So we've placed a high importance on that. It's not a glamorous test, and it doesn't look good on a spreadsheet, but thoracic mobility and hip mobility is probably the highest ones that we look for, and would have the highest causality to release velocity and distance.
If I can just say, Don Babbitt, who we're both good friends with, worked with Reese Hoffer, so previous world champion, and worked with him over a long period of time, and so has some good longitudinal data, and did lots of different tests and metrics, and the one thing that the only correlation they found over 30, you've seen this data, so 13, 14 years, that correlated to the distance thrown. They had bench press marks, squat marks going up, down, all these different things, that the only thing that correlated with distance thrown is that year on year his body weight was increasing up to a certain point, and his vertical jump relative to body weight stayed the same or increased, so therefore his jump to weight ratio actually improved. So because his body weight went up until a certain point, and he got to a certain weight, and it dropped off, and that was the only thing that was a good correlation for them. But let's just look at the data.
The classic there's a concept in throws, just for clarification, of separation, right? So that's a technical cue around the angle of the shoulders relative to the angle of the hips, right? So you can measure that in degrees, angles of separation, and the mindset that what I was taught growing up was more is better, right? More separation, longer time on the implement, yada, 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 right? Let's all train that. So we cue that as a coach. We're getting told, hey, just try and keep your shoulders back here, or whatever it may be. We did some tests on it, and it has zero impact. Beyond 15 degrees, it has a detrimental impact on release velocity for Tom, right? So
that stiffness.
Yeah, we had to be prepared to throw out. That's an example of something that we threw out. So we no longer talk about separation at all. And that was probably contrary to everything I believed a few years ago.
Just one final question. Do you do any sort of pre-season testing before you start training for the season?
Cool.
My name is Henny. I'm also a sprint coach from South Africa. I cannot allow Werner to ask a question and me backing off. My question is, you're working on blocks in the gym. Does your throw training being attached to that? Do you change when you change blocks in the gym? Do you change in any way your throwing training?
That's a good question as well. Short answer is no. We always what I'm trying to do is maintain one variable at any given time with throwing. So whether that's weight of implement, style of throw, a technical cue. So if we're working on something technical, I'm not going to change the weight of the shot. If we're working on something to do with half turns, I'm not going to cue him anything different on a full turn or change any other variable. So that does tie in physiologically with what you've got or what Tom's got to give on any given day at any given training block. So probably inherently yes, but formally no. Does that sort of answer your question, Henny?
Yeah. What I would like to know is your volume or your volume of throws. Does it change in that blocks? So the point I want to get to, I struggle a little bit with because now in sprinting you've got more distances. So I struggle a little bit to fix my running program, my track program. So I haven't got that sorted out clearly. So I just wanted to know from your side. For instance, your volume of throws, does it change in those blocks?
Only a small amount. So if we look at the bell curve of throws, we know Tom within a session he can get up to his best output on 5th and 6th throw. In a session, he can usually, this is when he's in shape, right? When he's in competition shape, 5 to 6 throws. And that's getting less and less with time. So being able to get to a high tempo quickly is important. To the point where we did no throws in the warm-up track at all before the final here, or the qualifying, no throws at all. So for him, a training session at any time of the year would never go beyond 20 throws total. And then it comes down. We try and cut that down leading into the major championship. 12 throws total in a set. This is full intensity throws, 9 throws, 6 throws, 3 throws. And the rationale behind that is just getting up to a competition tempo quickly rather than anything to do with a physiological stimulus.
That's good.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, good day. My name is Godwin Dorset from Dominica. Earlier you spoke about the weight of the implement you use during preparation. And I tend to understand that the weight of the implement, exact weight of the implement is not used, and most likely anything above the weight of the implement. What is your advice to coaches who tend to want to use higher weight doing training? And if you're doing that, at what time should they be used or what or not?
Just a personal philosophy, and I think it sort of applies across the career span, and something we're trying to ingrain now in a lot of our junior athletes in New Zealand and coaches, is to learn the ability to throw far first and then heavy second, right? So get someone familiar with the timing and the rhythm and the tempo of what it takes. I don't know, be interested in Andreas's take on this, whether it, getting some kind of release velocity that is required in shot to throw 22, 23, 24 metres with something, and that might be for a male a 4 kilo ball or a teenage male, and then the variable then becomes strength, right? Which we know a lot about. We know how to get people strong. What we are less sure of is how to get someone to throw really far. So if we control that variable more frequently, then we can start to reverse engineer and plug in the gaps and the characteristics to get them to do that with a heavier implement. So that's kind of the underpinning philosophy. My advice would be, I don't know, you got to think about it yourself and answer it for yourself. But the learn to throw far first and heavy second is generally the underpinning tenet. Yeah.
Oh.
discussion when they were discussing the weight of the implements for the junior weights and the under 18 weights. And I talked to a lot of my friends, my throws coach friends. We had a lot of, in the UK, they tended to use, they wanted to go heavy really early. Young girls at age 14 throwing a 4 kilo shot. And one of my good friends, Zolt Nemeth, who's the hammer coach in Hungary, and he was saying, look, same thing. It's really important that somebody learns to throw far at an early age. And if you're giving a 14-year-old girl a 4 kilo hammer to throw, she can only throw that with strength, which is just not what she wants to do. Whereas if you have her throwing a light hammer, she learns to turn fast and throw good distances. So if she can throw 70 meters with a 2.72 kilo when she's 14 and then go to 70 meters with a 3 kilo and then she goes to a 4 kilo, she knows how to throw 70 meters. And
it fundamentally comes back to how you see your event, right? So is it a physiological expression or is it a skill, right? And it could be both. I tend to sit more in the skill camp. So with that in mind, and you're thinking about things like a stretch reflex or a calibration of timing and rhythm that's required, it's a totally different lens to see it from rather than just seeing it as a training stimulus. So getting someone to throw, plus there's also a feel-good element, right? You've got young athletes growing up. It feels good to throw something and see it go really far. You know, if you're throwing a hammer, it's a 2 kg hammer or a hammer with a long wire. You know, there's simple ways to do it and get your athletes feeling, okay, and it demystifies it too. You know, it's just a number. I can throw a hammer 80 meters, 90 meters, discus 70 meters. It doesn't matter what weight it is. You know, you then break down the mental barrier of, hey, no one's ever thrown, 24 meters before. Yeah, they have. They just haven't done it with a competition weight yet.
Yeah. I particularly think long-term athlete development is an important thing.
Give yourself permission to throw far.
Yeah. And also because we've had people that have just got really good early and just never seen the light of day as a senior because they just never developed the skills to throw far. They developed strength early on and that was their limiting factor after that.
The importance you give to the skill aspect. Do you do additional exercise or activities to enhance the sensomotor behavior or besides throwing? Which other activities you use?
Gymnastics, golf, wrestling. We do a lot of left-handed, alternate-handed drills and throwing, balanced in there, and again with that slacklining. Yeah, so we're constantly stealing ideas. We do a lot of work with the All Blacks rugby team in New Zealand, and their scrum coach. For those who aren't familiar with rugby, scrum's the part of the game where they put their heads together and push against each other and. They're interested in a lot of the same questions, right? It's a hard maximal physiological task. I played rugby for a while and crossover with the All Black scrum coach now, and we actually went to go and watch the Royal New Zealand Ballet and work with their artistic director for a couple of days in a workshop, and we learned a lot there because they're asking the same questions, right? It's a physiological expression, but it's a skill, and there's an artistry component to it as well. So constantly just trying to pull different strings and get the athletes to think more deeply about their craft.
Right. Good.
Gary Morgan out of Michigan, which kind of leads into some of I help out with the youth kids, and I was wondering, what is some good training in what you've done with your athlete? What do you do for strength and speed training over a period of years? What all have you done?
Could I get you to just dig a little further with that question?
Well, like like with jumps and speed training, do you do sprints? What all have you helped to have time improve over a period of years? Some of the training you've done. You've talked about some things, but like jumps and speed, what are some of the things you've done with that?
I guess we've probably gotten more general and started to work on the weaker parts of the kinetic chain, right? You're only as strong as your weakest link, and throwing such the challenging, multi-dimensional, multifaceted task that it started to get a more robust understanding of why are we doing it before we do anything, and then going about building a good athlete first. Firstly, building a good human being, and then building a good athlete, and then building a good thrower in that order. So we're trying to I'm not quite sure if I've interpreted you or answered your question correctly here. Maybe we can chat afterwards. If you're after more exercises and things like that, we can chat about that. But
Yeah, that'd be good.
yeah, I'm sorry if I answered
That's
that
okay.
poorly.
There's one question there.
Do some skills, but not with the bilateral movement.
Buenos días, Tom. Soy Leonardo Malgor, entrenador de maratón de Argentina, y solamente quería preguntarle a Tom qué importancia le da él y qué tipo de alimentación realiza Tom, si tiene verdadera importancia para él el tema de la alimentación.
He's a marathon coach, talking about the importance of nutrition. How do you manage nutrition and how important it is for you?
Cool. Marathon coach asking about nutrition. Thank you. Thanks for your question. Marathon coach asking a throws coach about nutrition. Okay. That's one thing that off the back of our campaign in Rio, that was the number one gap that we identified in Tom's preparation. So we changed that this year. Tom's body weight's gone up. Just to give you some context, in the last 12 months, his body weight's gone up 3 kilograms and his skin folds have gone down. His body fat percentage has gone down about 6%. So we've made some fairly good ground in that area. I guess the big thing for us, we brought over a professor of nutrition from rugby background in Australia. He came over as a consultant for us and reviewed what we were doing, reviewed what Tom was doing and his daily practices. And the big thing for us was around timing of eating rather than content. So Tom grew up on a farm. He's got a fairly meat and potatoes, kind of palate that he likes to eat, a bit of vegetables, plenty of red meat. And we didn't want to interrupt that too, because it's got to be functional, it's got to be things that you like eating, and there's got to be that social element to it too. It's got to be robust enough to be able to travel to meets and eat what's in the dining hall and deal with different things too. But what has changed is the frequency of eating throughout the day, and the rewiring our mind rather than seeing nutrition as a recovery. Nutrition is now 100% for us fuel. It's not recovery at all, it's fuel. So the eating takes place early in the day and it takes place before training rather than after. Right? So again, required us to change our mindset a little bit, but I guess the proof's in the pudding, and we've made some good gains out of it. Calorie intake across a day or across a week or a year probably hasn't changed at all, but the distribution of the eating across the days yielded some results that I probably wouldn't have foreseen that they'd be that profound. But yeah, if you eat breakfast now with Tom, it's an experience. It takes him 45 minutes to get through it. But his dinner is just a small plate, and that's probably the inverse of what he was doing 12 months ago.
Coming from a potato-eating country, I'm interested to notice that maybe reduced the amount of potatoes.
You didn't eat.
But I'm really pleased to see the cross-cutting interest, the marathon coach and the shot put, the throwing coach communicating.
Thanks for your question.
I would love at this point to invite all of you to give a big clap to Sean, Dale and Oscar for this interaction. And I'm really pleased to tell you that this quality of interaction will be continued. Please be aware that tomorrow we have another biomobility speed on the topic, and it is my pleasure to inform you that beside the presenter for some applied science, Lawrence Seagrave, we have received a confirmation that Mr. Rainer will be here on the podium with us. He happens in this competition to be the medalist for the 100-meter third place in sprints. And those who know Rana know that he also has a triple jumper who is not that bad, who has not only an incredible performance, but also impressed us by being able between London to Rio to change the leg. So there's obviously some bilateral neuronal plasticity, which definitely he has to answer tomorrow some questions. So please again, spread the information. I believe strongly that it is not the flyers who make you coming. It is on the warming up track to tell the friends, there is this conference. Tomorrow it is all about speed, and be assured, we have throwers here, but we answer questions to marathon coaches. So please, I would love to see you and your colleagues tomorrow morning.